All right. Oh, we were live, Terrence. All right, everyone. So Chris Lopez here in the white collared shirt. Terrence is in the regular white shirt. I got the red pinstripes today to be fancy. Anyway, so we are doing another YouTube live to answer some questions on multifamily investing and actually real estate investing in general. So we've got, I think, 6 episodes out now for the real estate ride along show. And we are going to be having more publishing out here in the next couple of weeks. We just recorded like 4 more last couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So Terrence, I know we're waiting for some comments to come in here. What type of questions have you gotten so far? Because I know a lot of people like DM you on Instagram. Like, what
Yeah.
questions are you getting from people?
What kind of questions am I getting? People are asking me how they can partner with us. This morning, a gentleman asked if he could raise money for us. I had someone on the East Coast say that they had some potential interest in people looking at some properties that we had. They're wanting to get into Denver.
Really? So,
I think a lot of people asking about the market, what kind of cap rate, the one of the top questions is, hey, what kind of cap rates are you looking for? For whatever reason, people love throwing that word around, even if they don't know what it means.
so I know we got we got like 100 people on here now. So guys, ask questions out here. Throw it in. Let us know where you're from. Ask questions, and we will just start answering them. So I know we talked about this a little bit last week, but I mean, cap rates are, especially for the type of investing you're doing, they're pointless. I
Y-
think because you're
Yeah.
looking for the value add stuff.
It's not the most important data point. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, I think what does matter is if, down the road, if I'm looking to just be a passive buy and hold and park my money somewhere, that's where
Hmm.
the cap rate, the return really makes sense, really matters. But yeah, for us, we're looking, the most important metric, and we've talked about it, is after construction, what's the yield after construction? And that's kind of what we look for.
No.
So what do we got coming up here?
We got people from Bay Area, West Coast, Philadelphia, Northern California, Vermont.
Ooh,
No questions yet, though.
shout out Vermont. What kind of questions are you seeing? What have you what are people asking you?
I mean, aside from like how's the market doing, which
Hmm.
I get that like 10 times a day, which you
Right.
probably do as well. A lot of it is just I've had a lot of people reach out. Interesting enough to me, like asking about like deal structuring for LPs and GPs, and
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, oh,
Wow.
that's not my specialty. Like,
Right.
connect with Terrence on that one. I've had a few people ask me about that. A lot of it's just been underwriting though.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, how do you underwrite this? What assumption do you use? And the 2% rule, the 50% rule type stuff.
Right.
So
That's interesting.
yeah. All right. So all right, we got some questions coming in here now. All
Let's
right,
roll.
so we're gonna start off with Jason Spriggs. Jason says, is a rent to value ratio of 0.9% good? So it depends on a lot of things.
Right. Mr.
Depends
Underwriter over here. Why don't you take this one?
depends on what the market you're in. Depends on what your returns are. I'm not a big fan of that because that's essentially like the 1% rule or an inverse of the gross rent multiplier, the GRM. I don't use GRM. I like cap rates on cash return for
Mhm.
pure investing. Um, so I know, for example, here in Denver, we're buying a lot of rental properties from like 0.7 to 0.9% rent to value ratio. Sometimes a little bit lower, sometimes a little bit higher, but that 0.75 is right around what we're buying it at. And if you sit around and hold out for that 1% rule property, you're not going to find it. So it depends what market you're in. If that going rate in the market is a 0.9% for that market, it's probably a pretty good deal. Or it's a good base hit, so to speak. If it's higher than that or lower, you have to look at the market conditions. But I think just a straight rent to value ratio is a very poor way to measure the performance of the property because you really want to look at, hey, what's the cash flow? What's the upside for appreciation? What's the value add there to increase rents or increase property value? How's it fit into the longer term picture of what you're doing?
Yeah, Jason, I think one of the things that you're missing there are the expenses. So, you can go to the Midwest. We've talked about this a bunch of times. You can go to Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Minnesota, Indiana, and you could have a 2% return on the purchase price, but your net cash on cash after all your expenses could be less than if you buy in San Francisco, Denver, Dallas. Arizona, some of these other places that are higher priced, just because their property taxes, management, and maintenance could be less. In the Midwest, you're going to have much higher property taxes and much higher maintenance just because of the cold, the swings in the weather. So I think, what you want to look at, what Chris alluded to, is you want to look at what's your net cash on cash return on the investment, not just the rent to the purchase price. Because at the end of the day, if you have a great multiple on your rents, but your expenses are three times as high, you're taking home much less money. And at the end of the day, all you really care about is what do you get to take home? What do you get to keep?
The only purpose I like these rules are like the very high like level GRM rules like this is if you're just getting to know a market, go analyze 100 properties, but don't analyze 100 properties of the same type in the same neighborhood. I've got clients that do that. So no, hey, go analyze 10 properties on the south side, 10 properties here, 10 properties here, 10 properties here. And what you'll see is after you analyze about 3 or 4 properties, you'll see the trend. Hey, this area, here's the print or the rent to value ratio in this neighborhood. And you'll see across the board or across the map how it changes. And if you don't know the market, that can be a great way to kind of high level start targeting things, to start targeting neighborhoods that have a good rent to value ratio. But that's something like our brokerage publishes is they actually publish a GRM map and you can see the really high GRMs. They're the cool places to live, but they make really bad rental properties.
100%.
Ooh,
Someone had a good question from San Antonio in there.
where is this one at?
I didn't there. What is that?
From David?
Yeah.
All right, so David from San Antonio says, given the pandemic and renters in transition, is this the optimum time to invest in rental property?
We've been getting a lot of this with the global pandemic. David, I think the key is just like in the stock market, you have to be looking at disciplined investing. You have to have, the fundamentals are what are your goals? What's your agenda with real estate? How much cash are you starting with and where do you want to be? And then you can back into, okay, this is the right deal for me to start out with. And I think it's always a good time to buy. You just need to be disciplined and have a clear game plan on what you're looking for. But it's always, I mean, in a pandemic, in a recession, in a total bull run. I mean, there's lots of opportunity out there in any market condition. The key is just being disciplined with your strategy. And so to know your strategy, you have to know what your goals are and how much money you're working with and where you want to be. But
Yep,
I think absolutely it's a great time to be buying if you're disciplined.
exactly. And if you got cash from the bank, because one of my tenants on Friday, my property manager called me and said, hey, the tenant, she's only working like 15 hours a week. She's moving out on Sunday. She needs to break her lease early. So we're going to try. I'm like, right, that's fine.
Yeah.
But that ups my vacancy. It might stay vacant for a month or two while we get it filled up, or not that long, but hey, it'll stay vacant for a bit. I probably lose a little bit of rent. Hey, that's not a big deal.
Right.
But what if she lost her job and then she refused to move out because we, still have a backlog of evictions? Well, then I'll be out rental income for 2 to 4 months of that unit.
Right.
So make sure you got cash reserves to take any of those like curveballs that the pandemic will give you.
That's right.
And also, I got cash. Terrence got cash. We're both buying property. So from a high level, nothing scares us. But I really like what you said, like stay disciplined to your plan.
Yeah. Got to have a plan.
Um, here's a good one, I think. So this is perfect for you, Terrence. James Johnson says or asks, what's the best way to finance a construction repair on multi-unit properties? Looking to get a loan based on the value of an existing portfolio.
Yeah, James, glad you brought that up. That's a good rabbit hole for us to go down. So it depends on a couple things. Number one is your strategy. If you're looking to flip it and you're going to be in and out, I like getting a private loan or a hard money loan based on the speed that you're going to need to move, because then you will get 90 to 95, depending on the purchase price in the area, but you could get up to 90, 95% of the total cost. Most hard money lenders will lend 85 to 90% of the purchase price, and then they'll give you 100% of construction on a draw basis. So you can just have less cash into the deal, and you can get a much higher return if you're going to flip it or it's going to be a short-term hold. If it's going to be a long-term hold and the property is occupied, I like just doing it one at a time with cash flow. So if you're buying, let's say, a 4 unit, you can start one at a time as tenants want to move out and just use the cash flow to reinvest in the construction. And that way you have cash coming in. You're going to get a much lower LTV, but you'll have much less debt and a much lower payment. So right now, I think you can get a loan for, somewhere around 4%, maybe less, depending on the area and local banks. But your payment will be a lot lower. You'll have cash flow coming in, and then you can use that to rehab. So it just depends on what you're looking for. If it's going to be a long-term hold, I like getting a bank to finance it and just do it one at a time, do it slower, and you'll have much better cash flow along the way and a much lower payment. That'd be my that'd be my advice, James.
And so this made me think of while you're answering it. We just released that podcast last week, Terrence, where you broke down, you and your asset manager broke down a 25 unit
Right.
portfolio that you bought, you raised some money for,
Yeah.
and there's a great details you talked about, how you structured it, inspection, how you raised the money. So I'm gonna post a link to it right now in the comment section.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to check that out, yeah, hopefully that you can click that link. But that's off the podcast we did last week. And you can click that. Oh, it got screwed up here.
You could also check out a couple of the
Oops.
ride-along shows. We did a 4-unit turn, a 6-unit turn, and I think a 9, and every single one of those, we did different strategies on how we
Yeah.
financed it based on what the strategy was and the tenant profile and just how full the property was when we purchased it. So, there's a couple ride-along shows that go through how we finance that exact same strategy.
Yeah, and definitely like I know some people have missed this, like on the ride along shows. We spend the first 20 minutes walking through the videos, go through and watch the second half because we do a deep dive in the financials.
Mhm.
So make sure you check out the whole ride along show on there, and I'll post a link there in a second as well.
Gold Rush has a really good question.
Well,
It's
why
something
don't
you
you
and I have
read
talked
that while
about.
I get
Okay.
the ride along show link?
Gold Rush, where do you park your cash when you're searching for properties? Savings account, bonds, mutual funds, etc. It's a really good question.
It's Bitcoin, right?
I put it in Bitcoin. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a high level question. I like the way you're thinking. So there's a couple different things to do. So cash in if I'm going to have cash in the bank, I like to have it in a money market. You're going to get a little bit higher return. And then I also have a line of credit, a HELOC, based on several properties that we've owned for a long time and that we have a lot of equity in. And so what's nice about a HELOC is you don't pay any interest when you're not using it. And then when I need it, when I need the cash, I can just draw against it. And you're right now, I think you're paying 4.5%, 5%. So really cheap money, and you only pay what you use. So I like that. I think the number one thing that I go to is, a line of credit. Uh, that way when I sell something, I pay down the line of credit. And then when I need the money, I draw against it to go. So it's just like a low interest credit card that I can draw against at any time. And so that's normally where I park my cash. Just cash sitting in the bank doesn't really do you much good. But if you're going to have cash, I just use a money market. Vanguard has a high interest rate money market, much higher than like a local bank,
What does Vanguard pay for their money market? Do you
over
know?
1%.
Okay.
Yeah, over 1% for to sit there.
Because
Yeah.
I like Ally
Okay.
Bank or Ally Savings.
Yeah.
I mean, their interest rates have dropped with interest rates
Right.
dropping, but like 6 months ago they were at 2%,
Well.
and now they're like I don't know
Yeah.
1.2 or 1.3.
Yeah. I think Vanguard's is like 1, 2
Okay,
something.
I
But
mean, so basically we're both saying cash.
yeah.
I mean, like I would not put in the stock market
Yeah.
because that's going to go up and down. I've seen a lot of investors make this mistake where they say, "Oh, hey, we'll buy bonds because bonds are really safe."
Right.
Well, bonds are safe, but the problem is if you're buying bonds at say 4%, when interest rates 4%, and then interest rates drop, your value goes down. Then I forget
Right.
which way it works, but like
Yeah.
as
The
interest rates
inverse of the
changes,
interest rate.
yeah,
Right.
it actually changes as well. So a lot of people, hey, they park $100,000 in bonds, interest rate changes. Now if they sell it, they have $80,000 to take out.
Right.
So make sure you realize that as well. So I like cash. Terrence likes cash. I mean, cash is cash, and whether it's 0.5%, 1%,
It's,
1.5%, you're not getting rich off that, but you have stability.
right. But I would really look into a line of credit based on your primary residence if you can, if you have some equity, or if you have current rental properties, getting a line of credit against those. It's just a low interest rate credit card that you can draw down at any time.
Ooh, I like this
What else we
question.
got?
What's that? Brandel Perez asked, Hey guys, what are your thoughts on Section 8 tenants during the pandemic? Is it a smart time to rent to them to ensure rents are paid? I like them.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that. We're actually doing a deal that we're gonna close on in the next 2 weeks that's all subsidized. It's on 17 HUD contracts that the federal government has guaranteed the rents for, and one of the reasons why we're buying it is just because of the uncertainty during COVID. Um, Having guaranteed rents from the government's a great thing.
Yeah.
You know, you may have a little bit more maintenance, but you're gonna have much higher occupancy, and you're gonna have guaranteed income every month.
Yeah, I like them. I mean, I didn't start investing in real estate till after the 2008 crash. But as I got into it, I, talked and interviewed with a lot of like investors that had lived through the crash, some that made it, some that didn't, but, winners and losers from that crash.
Right.
But a really common theme I heard from people that made it was they sang the praises of Section 8.
Yeah.
They said, guess what? Everyone kept paying, or the government kept paying. Now, maybe the Section 8 tenant didn't pay their $50 share worth of the rent, but whatever, like that, if you're getting 95 cents on your rental dollar, that's still enough to pay the mortgage, or it should be. So I like Section 8 because it's guaranteed rents. I've got some Section 8 people, I know you do. Plus, it's interesting. As talking to property managers, you generally have some like higher wear and tear cost, but you have a lot lower vacancy because the average stay of a Section 8 tenant is like 4 or 5 years, at least out here in the Denver metro area. And so, yeah, higher maintenance costs, but you have like really low turn costs because market tenants seem to turn, a lot more frequently.
Right.
If you got tenant for 5 years, great.
Yeah.
I mean, I like that idea about it.
Yeah, you may get a little bit depending on the market you're in. I know Denver's Section 8 for 2 and 3 bedrooms is pretty close, maybe within $100 of the market rate, depending on the city and the zip code. But you're gonna, like Chris said, you're going to have less turnover, maybe a little bit more maintenance, and a little bit less in rent, but you're gonna have guaranteed rent, and they're gonna stay longer. And the other thing that's nice is you're not gonna have to really renovate the unit if you're doing Section 8, because of the way the voucher works. They don't have to have brand new tile, brand new countertops, and so I think net long term you're gonna save money. I would just be careful of the area, and then be aware that they're gonna most likely have more usage on that, especially if you have a 2 bedroom, probably gonna have 4 or 5 people moving in versus a market tenant. You're gonna have less bodies in the unit. So I think those would be the cons to it. But net, I think long term, I think it's a great solution.
So Eli asked, how do you go about evaluating a commercial multifamily market you want to invest in? How do I find job growth in the market as well? So, I mean, you have to have like what your criteria is. And I've talked to a lot of investors and they often have very different criteria. My number one criteria when looking at markets is just it's either things are either growing or they're shrinking. Like I go very
Mhm.
simple. I'm a keep it simple, stupid guy. Um, if the population is declining, if the job market is declining, that's a really bad long term trend. I don't care how cheap I can buy the prices. If renters and jobs are moving out and homeowners moving out, it's going to depress rents and depress prices. If places are growing with jobs and population, I like that. So for me, I keep very simplistic. I think that's the most important metric right there. Is it growing or shrinking? It's very rare to see a city or any place like stay static. It's either growing or dying.
Yeah. I think there's some really good metrics out there you can look at. I think the number one thing you have to look at, Eli, is where do you have a competitive advantage? You can look at, we've talked about it so many times, but you can look at markets, in the South or the Midwest that may have higher cap rates and look really attractive and have really good job growth and migration and all these metrics that people talk about. But if you don't have a property manager or someone on the ground that you trust, it's not really going to matter. You're going to end up just being like, and you're not going to have any advantage to anyone there that's local, and you're really going to have more risk. So even if you check all the boxes and nail the market with the most potential and upside for the next 5 or 10 years, but you don't have someone on the ground that you can trust that's going to manage and collect the rent and put the right tenants in and handle maintenance the right way, you're going to end up with a bunch of vacancy and not making any money. I know I have some personal friends that have invested in a couple markets in the Southeast because they did their research and, all these different studies. And they were like, this particular market, I think that one of them happened to be Memphis, but they're like, this particular market's the best for single family and duplexes. And so they put their money there and they've had vacancy like 4 out of the last 6 months, like 100%
Really?
vacancy. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think, that speaks to they checked all the boxes, did their research, but they didn't have someone on the ground they trusted to get the right tenants in. And what have they had? A global pandemic hits, the right tenants weren't in there, and they've had vacancy. And so all the research in the world wasn't able to save them because they didn't have someone on the ground that they trusted
That's a
that was going to
great
help
point.
them. So
Yeah.
I would just be really careful about just overanalyzing, having so much data, but then not having just the fundamentals of someone on the ground that you can trust when things go bad.
So was that Karthik ask, once you have a multifamily property under contract, what are the major ticket items that you have professionally inspected?
Yeah, this is a really interesting point. A lot of people ask us this question. We just actually included this in the podcast we did. We did a whole section on due diligence. I'd recommend you check that out. We also talk about it a lot on the Ride Along Show. The major ticket items, right? There's 5 of them. You want to look at the foundation, the sewer, the roof, the HVAC, the mechanicals, and the electrical. That's what you need to look at. That's where the big ticket items are going to be. And you want to hire, for residential, if you're an investor and you're savvy, you don't probably need to hire a residential home inspector, but on commercial, I highly recommend it. We get, I think I showed it to you, an 80-page report on every building that we do, and they go through every square inch, all the major mechanicals, the roof, the sewer, foundation, electrical, plumbing, everything. And you really need that. If you're going to start investing 6 figures, seven figures into properties, you want to have a professional go in there and evaluate it because it's just too much for 1 or 2 people to look at. You have to have a company that's licensed go in there, and those are the areas you want to look at. And then when you're, in the negotiation, if you have that kind of report, the seller can't really dispute that, when it comes from, when they have an 80-page document picking apart every, the areas of the building that need attention. But I recommend you to go, look at some of the ride along shows. We talk about that, or the most recent podcast we put out. We go into detail on how we negotiate it, how we attack every item in during the due diligence.
All right.
Let's see.
So you go with this question?
DC equity.
Yeah. DC Equity says for 2 to 4 unit house hack type situations, how do we compete with cash buyers if we were coming with a conventional or FHA loan? So great
Mm.
question. Feel your pain.
Have you been
Um,
there?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so Terrence, a lot. I'm a agent out here, and around 40-50% of our clients are house hackers.
Right.
And of course, a lot of people buy duplexes and fourplexes, and we
Right.
buy very few of those.
Right.
And that's a huge variety of reasons. But we are often competing. We're a very low inventory in Denver, but especially low multifamily inventory. And part of the problem with duplexes and fourplexes, you are competing with cash investors or investors that have a lower standard. So the reason it's becoming an issue, I don't know if you realize this, but FHA loans, they have a higher safety and appraisal. I'm sorry, a higher safety and health appraisal standard. So if I'm buying FHA and Terrence is buying conventional, I have a higher appraisal standard than Terrence does.
Mm.
So if there's chipping paint, they can flag you on that. If there's missing handrails, they can flag you.
Wow.
So those are very nitpicky items. And so a lot of multifamilies in Denver are, I mean, half are in just crappy shape. They will
Right.
not pass FHA inspections.
Wow.
And then plus the other reason is if you're using FHA, you have to move in the property within 60 days of closing because that's be owner occupied. So a lot of times, if the agent and the seller price it right now, what they're doing, they're usually going to accept a cash or conventional offer because it's going to be less headache and
Right.
less issues. And plus, reality is if I'm buying FHA and Terrence is buying conventional financing, I'm going to care a lot more about the property, how it looks than Terrence. Terrence doesn't really give a damn that much. Okay, he'll walk it, poke his head and get the inspection, look at the numbers. Cool, I like it. Me, I'm living there for a year. I'm going to be pickier.
Mm.
So I'm trying to give you the big picture to understand why there are issues there. And now, with that said, it is competitive, but it's not impossible. So, obviously make sure you're working with an agent that knows that market. Like a lot of residential agents are great, but they don't understand that small multi and investment market. So make sure you know someone that understands it. And then also, as you go forward, make sure you're writing competitive offers. Like a lot of times when we're writing offers on multis where it's competitive, we will waive a lot of inspection stuff, or we'll show the buyer that we'll show the seller really interested or serious in it. So there are ways to write competitive offers on there. But at the same time, at least in the Denver market, do not get fixated on multifamilies because, hey, great, if you buy a single family home or a multifamily home now, in 10 years, it's not going to really have major any impact on what your wealth or rental property portfolio looks like. Because a lot of times in 10 years, you won't own your first property. I don't know my first property. Do you own your first property?
No, I can't even remember what my first property was.
Yeah.
No.
And so a lot of times you'll end up selling it to like leverage up or cash out refi or just, hey, great, I learned this, got a better opportunity, sell it, move out.
So my perspective comes from the seller.
Yeah.
I'm normally on the sale side. Chris is on the buy side, so I thought that was really good. I would say, the seller, all they care about is the price. I mean, whether it's cash, conventional, or some other kind of, if I see that you have a Bitcoin there or closing with crypto, I don't. It doesn't really matter to the seller as long as they get the money, and so they just care about the convenience and the amount. And so I think if you go in knowing that you're at a disadvantage, the two ways to combat that are have a shorter due diligence, have maybe earnest money go hard sooner. So that way they know they have the security of a sure thing. And then you just have to come in at a higher price. If it's a deal, paying an extra $5,000 or $10,000 is not going to kill you as long as you're a long-term holder. So I think if you're competing against cash buyers and I'm the seller, I'm looking at, okay, how quickly are they going to get through due diligence and go hard on their earnest money so that I know I have a sure thing, and what's the number that I'm going to get at the end of the day. So the type of loan doesn't really concern me. What I look at is how long is due diligence, how quickly are they going to go non-refundable on earnest money, and what's the total dollars that I'm getting.
So I saw one question about to answer this. This is an interesting one. I'm actually curious to hear your take on this, Terrence, as well. Okay. Jeremy says, how would you start investing if you had $400,000 from a life insurance payout? So I'm assuming, someone passes away, you get a $400,000 payout. So if you've done no investing at $400,000, what would you do? Going
We've
back,
we've talked about this quite a few times. The first deal you should do to understand real estate is buy a primary residence. Now, I don't know your personal situation, but let's just say you're single. I would buy a primary residence that you can house hack. So buy a home with a carriage house, buy a home that you can rent out the basement or has a separate entrance, buy a duplex. You're in a really great situation. I think just because you have access to 400,000 doesn't mean you need to use that. So there's a lot of great programs out there that you can buy your primary residence with 3 to 5% down. So you could basically, spend 5 to 25, 30, $40,000 depending on your market. And then you're going to learn, own a home for 1 year, see what it's like to have maintenance, see what it's like to have renters, see what it's like to, you know, have a mortgage payment, have utilities, all these things that are going to happen with the home. You're going to have hail, you're going to have plumbing issues. There's going to be things that come up, so you want to get used to that. And then I think by your second or third year, you can start to look at other options. Maybe you want to do another house hack and you just want to rent the home that you were currently living in and go do it again. Or maybe you want to get into multifamily, or maybe you want to get into single family rentals. There's just so many options. But I think starting out, buy a primary residence that you can house hack, use it to create income, see what cash flow looks like, see what dealing with other tenants looks like. And then I think from there, you're going to have a good handle on which way you want to go. Do you like dealing with tenants? Do you not? Do you want to hire a property manager to do it for you from now on? But I think start small, just dip your toe in the water, start to learn the headaches of real estate, the lessons. You're going to learn so many things. You're going to have so many issues that come up, and you're going to want to start small.
I totally agree with you. The thing I'll add on there is start small and start slow.
Mm.
If you got $400,000, and let's just say, for example, take $100,000 now, and take $40,000 to buy your primary. Take the other amount, keep it in cash, maybe buy another property. I take the other, like the majority of their money, and I would stick it in the some like an I bond or some bond that's locked up for 6 months or a year. That way you can't touch it. Because if you look historically at when people win the lottery or when they get inheritances, I forget the exact stat, but the vast majority of people, hey, great, they inherit they win like $20 million in the lotto
Right.
jackpot, and then 2 years later they're like bankrupt or they're just as broke as they were before.
Right.
So a lot of it has to when it has to come with like money is that yeah, a lot of people don't have that financial IQ and the financial discipline to like know what they're doing. So I would start small and I would start slow. I would sock away a lot of money, and that way you don't like do something stupid and burn it all away and piss it away.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at because your question is how do you start investing? So, I think investing could be the stock market, could be real estate. Obviously, we're partial to real estate because that's where we've had the most success and we have the most control. But Jeremy, I would say, yeah, find someone that you really trust that's older, that's got a lot of experience with large amounts of money, and ask them to help you put together a plan. I think you want to be diversified. You want to have the big thing is to be disciplined and have a plan. And because, if you're looking at $400,000 in your checking account, it's something I tell my wife all the time. Like I have to, I want to keep her account with as little money as possible because if she sees too much money in there, she's just going to spend it. And as human beings, that's kind of our default is when we see that we have a lot of anything, we want to use it and spend it. And so I think you want to put a plan together and force yourself to save and have someone that in your life that has experience with this kind of money that can help you put together that plan.
So Brian C, there's a two-part question here, so I'll read the first and share the second as well. He says, my friends and I want to pool cash together to buy an investment property. We don't have enough cash outright to purchase a property, so we would need a loan. Question one, is this possible through an LLC? Follow-up question, if it's not possible through an LLC, how would you structure a 20% down conventional loan with three people? Do we each pay a third of the loan? So, can you buy properties through an LLC, Terrence?
100% yes.
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 So,
Easy.
simple answer is yes.
Yes.
Now, to peel back the onion and go down a rabbit's hole is if you're buying through an LLC, you're gonna be most likely going through a local bank. That's gonna be not like the Bank of America's, but like what you're like a local bank is. Like here in Colorado, First Bank is a big state bank. A lot of people do financing through First Bank. So whatever local bank you have in your state, they will do. That's what they're called a portfolio lender. So they're going to lend out their own money or their depositors' money. They won't give you a 30-year conventional financing on an LLC. That's to go in your name, but the local bank will lend you. A lot of times it's 20 or 25% down against an LLC. But then understand it's most likely going to be a 5-year or 7-year or 10-year ARM, which is an adjustable rate mortgage.
Brian, my piece of advice would be you know, if you can do something on your own, I would start there. I think when you start getting multiple people involved that have different agendas, different priorities, different circumstances, the last thing you want to be in is a situation where, you guys buy a property together, it's going really well, and then two or three of your friends want their money out, or they go through a different life circumstance and they need money, or they see something else they want to go do with the money, and then you're forced to like sell or do a buyout. It just gets really complicated and really expensive. I think if you're starting out, try and buy something that you can afford on your own. There's a lot of different government loans out there that you can do on your own with very little money down. If you just save a little bit and are patient, you might be able to it'll be simpler. And I think long term, you know, you're going to do a lot better financially if you can do it on your own. If you can just be a little bit more patient, maybe buy a little bit lower price point, I would highly recommend starting out on your own. You don't really need two or three people. There's a lot of ways to get properties with very little money down.
I totally agree with that. I mean, Terrence and I, we both had real estate partnerships and business partnerships. I mean, and girlfriend
Right.
relationships. I mean, some are great, some
Right.
are good, and a lot are bad. A lot of partnerships, I mean, they're like marriages, 50-50. Half goes well, half goes bad. So I would really agree with Terrence on there. I would try to go solo. And, you know, do all three of you and your two buddies, do all three of you guys own your primary residence? If the answer is no, my advice would be cool. Each one of you guys go out there and house hack. Go
Right.
use 3.5% down FHA or do a 5% down conventional and go out there and house hack a property. It keeps it more simple for all you guys. And as Terrence pointed out, more realistically, will probably all be wealthier by doing it that way versus going on one deal. And they'll keep life simpler,
Yeah,
man.
because through an LLC, you're gonna have to put together an operating agreement. You're gonna have to define everyone's role, who's doing what, and it just gets really messy really quickly. You know, I just like it's going to be slower and not as fun. Maybe you're not going to be able to buy and look at the properties maybe you could afford with two or three other people involved. But long term, I think you're going to be really thankful and glad that you went out on your own, saved the money, were disciplined, and and did it maybe slower and not as fun, but you're going to make a lot more money long term and have a lot less headaches because no matter what, nothing good lasts forever. And you guys could have a really good 2 or 3 year run, but at some point, people are going to want to do different things and you're going to be forced to make some decisions you don't want to have to deal with.
So let's see here. Here's an interesting question. So Brendan says, per historical data, the lower the unemployment rate, the higher the value of houses. And the higher the unemployment rate, the lower the housing prices. How are you planning for a crash in the housing prices? I'm not planning for a crash in housing prices.
Yeah, I think a lot of this depends on the area you're
Yep.
in. I think there could be, let's just take Detroit, for example. There could be a lot of unemployment in Detroit, and housing prices may go south in a market like Detroit. But in other markets, employment is not as down. It's more diversified. Like in Denver, housing prices from a year ago are up 8 to 10% from last year, even through the pandemic, just because of supply and demand and low interest rates. So I think there's other factors at play here. You have to look at every city individually that you're looking at and those trends. And there's a lot of people moving. Like I would say, New York has been getting crushed, right? A lot of people are leaving the city because of jobs and the pandemic and just a lot of other social economic issues. So does that mean that the rest of the country is going through what New York's going through? Absolutely not. I think, you look at Denver, Austin, Dallas, Phoenix, there's a bunch of markets that are on fire just because of supply and demand and low interest rates. And there's just not that much inventory, and there's actually a shortage of affordable housing. Especially under $500,000 in Denver. There's 20. I've talked to some agents. You can probably speak to this better than I. There's 25 offers on properties right now in Denver under $500,000. They go, the property goes live and there's multiple offers. So I just think you have to look at every city individually, and you can't just look at one piece of data. Unemployment's a good factor, but there's just so many others. And right now, with low interest rates and a shortage of supply, a lot of markets are actually in a boom with
Yeah.
with housing. But if there is like we've talked about, if there is a crash in Denver, we're going to continue to buy. We'll just adjust our box, and but we'll still be buying. It'll just look different. Our criteria will look different.
I was actually just this morning. I glanced at the data. So usually around the 7th or 10th of every month, our local MLS releases market stats for the previous month. So
Right.
we're like what, August, I think 6th or 7th today. So looking at stats for July, and July 2020 is one of the rare instances where we actually sold more properties than there was inventory on the market.
It's crazy.
And that goes back to supply and demand.
Right.
And this is, if there's a lot of demand, not enough supply, it's very hard for housing prices to crash. And Terrence is right. I mean, a lot of these properties have, we're talking like double digit multiple offers. So let's even half that buyer pool gets wiped out. It goes from 20 to 10 offers. That gets wiped out, goes from 10 to 5 offers. Like a lot has to change. And this is in Denver for it to go to like, any type of a crash. And from high level data I'm reading, it sounds like a lot of the state or a lot of the parts of the country is in a similar situation. So know your local market data. But like I said, I'm not personally planning for a crash. Like if we have to make a bet right now, and I'll bet anyone a pitcher of beer and $100 that Denver prices will not crash between here and this time next year.
Right.
So Gold Rush says, "Hey guys, where do you recommend finding the best investor-friendly agents?" Well, that's Bigger Pockets, of course, right?
The number one site. Yeah, I've actually back in the day when I was just getting started, I was just scrolling through Bigger Pockets, and now you can see agents in your market, and you can basically just send them a message, and in their profile, they're going to tell you what their specialty is and where they focus on. And most of the people on Bigger Pockets, special that are agents, work with investors. So I recommend going on Bigger Pockets and just scrolling through and spend an hour or two a day just looking at people, what they're commenting, what they're posting, their bio, and just send them messages that are in your market, and you'll see which one you connect with. But I think Bigger Pockets is definitely the place to find
Yeah.
the right agent.
And Bigger Pockets is great. And I would also just whatever city you're in, set up keyword alerts on the forum.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're in Denver, so set up a Denver keyword alert, for example. And if you read those after a couple of weeks, you'll see there's usually like a handful of investors, a handful of agents, a handful of other people that are posting, and you'll get a feel for who are active in the forums. Some will be agents for sure because they're out there trying to like that's how they network for business. Some people just be posting, but those are good people to reach out to as well. And you can also just say, hey, they're posting here, they're posting here, they're posting here. I'd also just go to Google and type in, Denver real estate investing agents or whatever keywords. But I would definitely start with bigger pockets because that is phenomenal. Like virtual networking is the right word, I think.
It's the best. It's seriously the best. You know,
Yeah.
it's the best site to find what you're looking exactly what you're looking for.
And the second part of your question there, Gold Rush, how do you screen out the ones who don't know about cash flow and only know how do you sell your dream home? I think that's really simple in the first like either over email or like 10 minutes of a phone call. Just come prepared with a couple questions. Just say, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I want. Can you send me a couple examples of recent rental properties or recent house hacks that you've closed on? And that one question will filter out a lot of people. Like I get a lot of clients that say, they went back and talked to their agent, helped them buy their family dream home because like, hey, I'm gonna talk to my agent, and they're like, I spent 3 months with his agent, which is it's been a waste of time, and they don't know anything. And that nothing wrong with them. They're like, you come to me buy your dream home. I'm like, yeah, I don't really like that, so go talk to someone else.
Yeah, good agents are just going to tell you the truth if they're the right
Yeah.
fit or not because they don't want to waste their time. So if someone's experienced, they're going to look at you and say, "Hey, what are you looking for?" And you're going to tell them, and they're going to say, "Oh yeah, you know what? That's not where I spend my time and focus on." So,
So Brendan asked if I'm saving up and plan on buying within the next 4 to 6 months, when would you start looking for places to buy, and how would you go about finding a 2 to 4 plex to invest in? I'm assuming we're assuming that this is probably a house hack property, so you're gonna live in there as an owner occupant. Your best bet for those is MLS. It's very hard to find off market deals that work for house hack properties, especially like multifamily house hack properties. I think it's a waste of time for the majority of investors try to do like off market deals for house hack properties. We find almost, I want to say 100% of our house hack properties on the MLS. So I would stick on the MLS, find a local agent that knows investing, like we just talked about, go in bigger pockets, network in your community or your town and find someone on there. And then talk with an agent, put a game plan together. What we do out here in Denver is I always tell my clients, hey, 90 days before you'll be moving the property. So if you want to be moved in, January 1st, work back 90 days. So December, what's it?
November,
November,
October.
October. So by October 1st, we want to be locked and loaded to go out there and be ready to look at properties. So you get your lending pre-approval done. We've already looked at some properties online. We set up some MLS searches online. You've already run some deal analyses, and we go out there and we start looking at properties come that October 1st number, October 1st date, and then September you can spend the time getting pre-approved. That's just it doesn't take much time. It'll be a week or two of getting your paperwork into the lender. I always have my clients run deal analyses. We use a spreadsheet. You can also use a bigger pockets calculator. Those work great for rental properties. And then run some numbers. And that way you start understanding underwriting and then go out there and look at properties in that first 30 days. And then depending on your market, it might be one offer, it might be five offers, get someone under contract. But 90 days is a good mark I have found in the Denver market to be ready to go to start getting active on your hunt.
Yeah, I love that, and that's something that you're doing full time in with your brokerage, Brendan. And when I'm looking for a property, I post, and I don't have, or I feel like I want to meet more brokers. Another option would be post it on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and just say, "Hey, I'm looking for someone to help me find dot 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 whatever the property is." And I think you'll be amazed at how many people respond and hit you up. I just last week put out a post on LinkedIn and said what I was looking for, and I had maybe 6 to 7 different agents hit me up and say, "Hey, we can help you. This is what we've done," and wanted to schedule time to talk. So I think you can find real estate agents through bigger pockets. You can also, if you're looking for something specific like that, put it out there on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and see who reaches out to you. Most likely it's going to be people that are hustlers that have done exactly what you're looking for.
That's a great point. What type of property? I'm curious. Like, what did you post? Like, what type of property was it?
I just said that I was looking for brokers that had closed 100 plus multifamily portfolios in the Denver market. And I
Okay.
think I put maybe Denver and Des Moines.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Carmetta says, what about rural areas? We have people moving to my neighborhood in Vermont like crazy. So, I mean, it's really hard to see data from this yet. I'm assuming you're talking about like the COVID stuff, but I've seen a couple of headlines and talked to agents. Like I saw an article in the I think the Denver Business Journal this morning, and I was just saying how like the mountain resort market, so the Aspens, the Breckenridge, like the place up the mountain around Denver, they're just seeing a boom in real estate. Not just from people in Denver, but they quoted someone from New York. They're like, hey, it's our dream to live in the mountains, and now since we're all working from home, we can go out there. So they're seeing a surge in school enrollments and also a surge in prices. So I mean, it would be hard to say invest on that. Depends on numbers. Like, hey, you're not going to invest in Aspen for cash flow. You're not going to invest in the mountains usually for cash flow. You'll probably see some great appreciation. Um, but first off, you got to make sure there's a property makes sense as a rental property. Now, if it's maybe not, hey, this rental numbers are slightly worse than here, but you can tell, hey, the trends, people are growing and supply and demand. Great, you might see a bigger pop on appreciation and a higher increase in raising your rents over the years. So I like the idea. I think we'll see more people moving out of the cities, more demand for detached properties, more these rural areas and second vacation home areas. But you still got to make sure, as Terrence said earlier, you got to make sure you're disciplined, stick to your plan, and make sure it's still a good rental property first. But if you can get that pop on the upside for appreciation or a future rent increases, grab it.
Yeah, well said. I think the key to this session, I think, is just be disciplined. You got to have a plan. You got to be disciplined. You know your market, and just because a bunch of people are moving in and driving up the price doesn't mean you need to overpay. Just be very disciplined. Know the kind of property you're looking for. Know the location. Know your price point. Understand rents, and then execute.
And a follow up comment here from Carmetta that I'm just realizing she wrote. She says a house that was $80,000 a few years ago is now listed at 240 plus.
So maybe I would look at if you had properties selling.
Yeah.
Now would be a good time to sell, and then just be patient on looking for other properties. There's always even Denver's been doing the same thing. I think you could almost say the same thing. Like people that bought in Denver properties for 300,000 4 years ago, now they're selling them for 500. So it's the same thing, but there's still deals to be had even in Denver. I'm a living testament of that. Like no matter how hot the market is, we're always finding opportunity. So you can definitely still find opportunity. Carmody, you just have to hustle, be diligent and intentional about looking for deals. Ronaldinho.
Good. I'm glad you're able to pronounce that.
Ronaldinho.
So, what are the factors I must consider when trying to calculate the amount of rent I can collect off a cash flowing rental property? There are, I mean, probably close to like a billion articles on Bigger Pockets and Google about this. So, I would definitely start one of those billion articles out there. But it comes down to just the basics of underwriting. Make sure you're accounting for vacancy, make sure you're accounting for repairs and maintenance, uh, capital expenditures, property management, insurance, taxes. Make sure those main items are getting up there. Just make sure you're calculating those. Don't get worried about, oh, if the bill's $10 here or $20. Get the high level items, but go buy a book. Bigger Pockets, some great books. Go research their website. I can't think of a specific article on there because there's so many of them, but there's so many articles that tell you how to underwrite properties, or also watch the ride along show, because at the second half of the show, we go through some detailed underwriting the properties and we go through the main items that we look at as well.
Yeah, that's well said. And I'm not sure if you're asking about rents, but someone just asked me this the other day on another call, and they were asking about some property that some broker told them that what it could rent for. And I would just say verify everything. So if one property manager is saying, "Hey, I can get you 1,200," talk to two or three other ones in the market, and then go on HotPad, Zillow, Apartments.com, and verify that for yourself. Especially if you're just getting started, don't take other people's word for what things can sell for or rent for. Go online and verify. There's so many tools on the internet that will tell you what other similar properties are renting for. And even myself to this day, I still do it on every property we're going to buy. I go out and I drive it and I verify the rents online, and I use two or three different sources for that. So, the ones that I use, Zillow, Apartments.com, HotPads, and those are national sites that will have every zip code and every rental in your area. So I would just verify that as well. Don't take one person's word for it.
That's a great point. And those sites, like, I've not found the need to go subscribe to Rentometer, because I mean, you look at Zillow and Hotpads, they show you
For free.
for free, other properties, what they rent for, and say, oh, look at three properties. Oh, these two are very similar to it based on filtering out 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, you can see what they rent for.
Yeah, another interesting site that not a lot of people are talking about, but is really growing is Facebook Marketplace. You can go on Facebook Marketplace and see what a lot of places near you are renting for. So there's so many free sites out there. You just have to spend literally five
Yeah.
minutes, and you'll be able to find, uh, be able to confirm and verify the rents.
Yeah. That's actually interesting about Facebook Marketplace is that is a great place for like house hackers doing room by room rentals.
Right.
I don't do room by room house hacking, but I have clients that do. They all sing the praises of Facebook Marketplace for room by room house hacks. All right, so we got time for one more question, and then we got to hop off here, guys. So
SB is the winner.
SB says, "What is a good exit strategy for house hacking when you have a conventional loan?" It's
This is
kind of
for
a loaded
you.
question. So depends a lot. I mean, for house hacking, you're not getting rich off the initial purchase. You're not getting rich off the cash flow in year one, but it's that long term play. I really associate with like dollar cost averaging in the stock market. Buy a place and give it 10 years, you'll probably have a really good property. So it depends what happens with the property. House hack it, move out, convert to rental, repeat as much as you can until you get married or tired of it or kids or whatever it is. And depending on how the property performs, a lot of times we're seeing in Denver, our properties will appreciate a lot. Well, in 10 years, if your property value has doubled, but your rents have gone up 20%, it's no longer a good rental property. Might be a good time to sell and do something else. My very first property I bought was a house hack in 2011. I bought for $65,000. I sold it 2 years ago for like $225,000. Took the money, 1031 it, and now I bought a fourplex with its proceeds. So I think a great exit strategy in a house hack really depends on how the property performs, which is typically going to be hey maintain it continues to be a good rental. Maybe consider doing a cash out refi or sell 1031 it and leverage up and go buy a small apartment building.
Yeah, and if it hasn't increased a lot in value like it would in a market like Denver, let's say it's the Midwest where there's not a lot of appreciation, but you've owned it for 10 years, you've paid down a bunch of principal, then you can just take out a HELOC with the equity you created and go buy another property. You may not have to sell.
All right, well we got one more question here. I think Evan's giving us some ribbing here since we skipped his question.
Oh.
He says, "What is the smallest population of a city you would invest in?" I don't have a great answer for that.
Yeah, again, earlier we talked about I would look at competitive advantage. So if I have a competitive advantage in a market that has, 2,000 people, I would obviously be really careful about, looking at the job market there and understanding, why 2,000 people are going to stay there. So I do think that population could matter, but I just look the most important thing for me is competitive advantage. If I have an advantage there, either with somehow to get tenants or to find properties under market value, and to manage it, that's what I look for, and that's why I invest in Denver and Des Moines. That's where I feel like I have the biggest competitive advantage. I'm not really interested in the population of either of those markets, although I believe in both of those markets long term. I looked at where do I have a competitive advantage.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. I just dropped a link in the comments for the real estate ride along YouTube playlist. So we got 6 episodes out right now. Check those out. Please give us feedback, thumbs up, leave us comments. That makes Bigger Pockets like the show more, and therefore we keep doing more shows. So definitely give us some love on there. We are actually hopping off to record some more financial videos or financial portions for future real estate ride along shows. So make sure you check out that show. Keep joining us here for YouTube Lives and keep the questions coming, guys. We appreciate it.
That was good. Nice work, Chris.